Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping straight from that incredible high point, the promise of Emmanuel in Isaiah chapter 7, right into the thick of it with chapter 8. And it feels, well, much more grounded, almost brutally political.
It really is. Chapter 8 deals with the immediate fallout, the reality on the ground. Judah, under King Ahaz, they're completely paralyzed.
Yeah, paralyzed by fear, it seems. Fear of their neighbors, the Syro-Ephraimite coalition.
Exactly. Fear of man, political instability, the war. And remember, Ahaz had just rejected God's offer of a sign based on trust.
So chapter 7 was the offer, and chapter 8 is what? God doubling down.
You could say that. It's God's counteroffensive against that national panic. He's forcing a choice.
Okay, so what's the mission for this deep dive then? What are we trying to pull out of this chapter?
Well, the core message, I think, is understanding how God uses these very public signs, even the threat of judgment, to force a decision.
A decision between what exactly?
Between total reliance on Him, finding sanctuary in Him, or giving in to that fear, chasing human alliances, even dabbling in the occult.
Which turns God himself into a stumbling stone.
Precisely. Sanctuary or stumbling stone, that's the tension. So we'll go verse by verse, look at the prophecy, the psychology behind the fear, and importantly, how this ancient warning still speaks to us today.
All right, let's do it. It starts immediately, doesn't it, with a really striking, almost bizarre sign. This name.
Maher-Shalal-Hash-Baz.
Yeah, that one.
And what's really fascinating right off the bat in verses 1 and 2 is the sheer public nature of this. God demands accountability.
How so?
He tells Isaiah, take a large tablet or maybe a signboard, something substantial, and write this name down.
Maher-Shalal-Hash-Baz.
Yes. And write it with a man's pen, meaning in ordinary, plain characters, not some mystical script.
So everybody could read it, like a public announcement.
Exactly. Think of it like a billboard prophecy. It's meant to be unavoidable, accessible to every citizen. No excuses later that they didn't know.
Okay, so unlike the Immanuel sign in chapter 7, which felt a bit more mysterious in its timing.
This one is concrete, immediate, public, undeniable. God's leaving no wiggle room.
And the name itself is the message.
It is. Maher-Shalal-Hash-Baz. It means swift is the plunder, speedy is the spoil, or maybe quick to the plunder, swift to the spoil.
Wow. So right there, he's declaring judgment on someone.
On Judah's enemies, the ones they were so afraid of, Syria and Israel. Their doom is coming, and it's coming fast.
But God doesn't just have Isaiah write it down. There's this emphasis on witnesses, isn't there? Making it almost legal.
That's a great way to put it. It is like a legal deposition. This isn't just Isaiah's personal feeling. It's a formal, recorded prophecy.
So who are the witnesses?
He needs 2 faithful witnesses to attest that this was written before the events happened. He needs Uriah the priest and Zechariah, son of Jeberechiah.
Uriah the priest. And hang on, isn't he the same Uriah from 2 Kings? The one who was a bit too eager to please King Ahaz, built that foreign altar?
Very likely the same one. And that's part of the genius, or perhaps the irony here. God uses this prominent, possibly compromised, public figure to validate his undeniable word.
So the truth of the prophecy stands regardless of the witness's personal flaws.
Exactly. It shows the prophecy's certainty transcends the human instruments used. And Zechariah, perhaps a more reliable figure, provides that necessary second witness, grounding it in public, verifiable testimony.
It's like God's bypassing the king and going straight to the public record.
Precisely. A divine PR move, if you will. But then the prophecy shifts, doesn't it?
Right.
It goes from being written on a tablet
to being embodied in a person, a child.
Yes, it becomes a living prophecy. Verses 3 and 4 describe Isaiah going to his wife, who's called the prophetess.
Does that mean she also had prophetic gifts?
It could, or it might simply be her title as the prophet's wife. Either way, she's clearly involved in this divine work. She conceives and bears a son.
And the son's name is?
Maher-Shalal-Hash-Baz. God commands it. So the child is the sign. His very existence is a constant, unavoidable sermon.
Imagine that growing up. Hi, I'm swift to the spoil.
Right. Think of the social pressure, the constant reminder. Everywhere Isaiah's family goes, this child is a walking, talking declaration of impending doom for the regional powers. The message can't be ignored.
Dad, there's a specific time frame attached to this living prophecy, isn't there? A very short one.
Incredibly tight. It directly addresses the immediate crisis. God says, before the child knows how to cry, my father or my mother.
So before you can even talk properly, like maybe a year and a half old?
That's the idea. Before that very early stage of development,
Yeah.
the wealth of Damascus, Syria, and the spoil of Samaria, Israel's capital,
The very enemies Judah feared,
will be carried away by the king of Assyria.
Wow. So God's saying, stop panicking about Rezin and Pekah. Their clock is ticking, and it's ticking fast. Assyria's got this.
Exactly. It confronts their fear head on. And historically, this happened remarkably quickly. Tiglath-Pileser III of Assyria conquered Damascus and hammered Samaria around 732 BCE, just a few years after this prophecy.
So the sign wasn't just symbolic, it was a precisely timed guarantee.
A guarantee of the speed and certainty of judgment on Judah's enemies. God is in control of the timeline.
Okay, so God proves his immediate power over Judah's enemies. But then the focus seems to swing right back to Judah's own spiritual state, their own choices.
Yes, verses 5 and 6 pivot hard. Now it's about why Judah is facing its own crisis. And it comes down to a fundamental rejection.
A rejection symbolized by water.
Two kinds of water, actually. First, they rejected the gently flowing waters of Shiloah.
Shiloah. That's the pool of Siloam in Jerusalem, right? Fed by the Gihon spring.
Exactly. It was Jerusalem's reliable local water source. Metaphorically, it represents God's quiet, steady, constant provision and his covenant defense right there in their midst. It's subtle, maybe unimpressive.
But dependable.
Dependable, but they despised it. The text says they rejected these waters that go softly.
Why? What did they prefer?
They rejoiced over King Rezin of Syria and Pekah of Israel.
The very enemies God just promised to destroy.
Yes. It shows their mindset. They preferred the big, noisy, dramatic power plays of human alliances. They trusted in worldly strength, the big river solutions, instead of God's quiet, faithful presence symbolized by Shiloah.
That says a lot about their psychology, doesn't it? Rejecting subtle spiritual reality for flashy human schemes.
It reveals a deep-seated lack of faith, a need for visible, overwhelming power rather than quiet trust.
And the consequence for rejecting the gentle local waters of Shiloah is...
God says, okay, you want big water, I'll give you big water.
Right.
He brings upon them the waters of the river Euphrates.
The Euphrates, that's the massive river associated with
Assyria, exactly. The strong and many waters of the Euphrates symbolize the overwhelming power, the glory, the sheer might of the king of Assyria and his unstoppable armies.
So Assyria isn't just an invading empire, they're the instrument of God's judgment, symbolized by this foreign flood.
Precisely. It's a brilliant, terrifying metaphor. Assyria is the flood God unleashes because Judah rejected his gentle stream.
And how bad does this flood get for Judah? It's devastating. Verse 8 says the flood will overflow all its channels, sweep through Judah, and reach even to the neck.
Up to the neck. That sounds like near drowning. Utterly submerged, almost dead.
That's the image. The land is inundated, panic is total, they're at the absolute brink, but the head remains above water.
The head being Jerusalem.
Yes. The flood reaches the neck, implies mortal danger, but stops just short of complete annihilation. Jerusalem, the head, survives.
Which lines up historically with Sennacherib's invasion later, around 701 BCE, right? He devastated Judah but couldn't take Jerusalem.
Exactly. The metaphor perfectly describes that historical reality. God brings judgment right to the limit but preserves a core.
And then right in the middle of this terrifying flood imagery comes this incredible phrase.
The Immanuel anchor. Second half of verse 8. Even as the land is drowning under the Assyrian tide, God calls it your land, O Emmanuel.
Wow. So even in the midst of judgment, God reaffirms the promise. He declares ownership through the promised God with us. It's radical. He's saying this land belongs to Emmanuel, even while it's being judged. This is the ultimate hope for the faithful remnant. The political situation is dire, the judgment is real, but the covenant promise sets a boundary.
God's presence dictates the limits of the destruction.
Yes. Emmanuel is the final word, the non-negotiable reality that means the flood cannot ultimately prevail.
That foundational hope then allows God to issue this global challenge in verses 9 and 10.
It becomes a taunt, really, aimed not just at Assyria, but at all nations, all human powers conspiring against his people or his plan.
What's the challenge?
He says, basically, go ahead, band together, prepare for war, gird yourselves, plot your strategies. The Hebrew words emphasize all that frantic human activity, the military planning, the political scheming.
Bring it on, essentially.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But God declares, you shall be broken in pieces, no matter how clever your plans, how strong your alliances.
They'll come to nothing.
It will come to nothing. Your counsel will not stand. Your spoken strategies are meaningless. Why?
Because God is with us, Emmanuel.
That's the bedrock reality. Ki Immanuel. God is with us. That's the ultimate truth that overrides all human geopolitical maneuvering. It's the theological basis for courage.
So for the faithful remnant hearing this, it's a massive psychological boost, isn't it? Don't fear the headlines. Trust the Immanuel reality.
Absolutely. It's the ultimate antidote to the fear of man and political chaos. Divine presence trumps human power.
Okay, so that reality, Immanuel, God's ultimate power, becomes the foundation for what comes next, this direct, almost forceful instruction to Isaiah himself.
Yes, verses 11 to 13 describe a really intense spiritual intervention. God speaks to Isaiah, and the text says it was with a strong hand upon me.
A strong hand upon me. What does that typically signify? It sounds physical.
It often does, especially when you see it used with prophets like Ezekiel. It implies a kind of supernatural compulsion, an overwhelming spiritual or even physical force. God isn't just suggesting this, he's grabbing Isaiah, metaphorically speaking, making sure he gets this message undistorted by the surrounding panic.
Wow. Okay, so what's the urgent message delivered under this strong hand?
It's profoundly countercultural. The main command is, do not walk in the way of this people. Separate yourself from the mainstream reaction.
And specifically, separate himself from their fear, their paranoia.
Exactly. God explicitly warns him not to call conspiracy everything that people are calling conspiracy.
That sounds incredibly relevant today. The tendency to see conspiracies everywhere when things feel unstable.
It's timeless, isn't it?
Yeah.
In times of political upheaval and fear, people get swept up in rumor, suspicion, fear-mongering. God tells Isaiah, don't buy into that spirit of paranoia.
So if you're not supposed to fear the conspiracies or the political threats, what are you supposed to fear? How do you find stability?
By redirecting your fear. God provides the antidote. The only one you should fear, the only one you should hold in awe and dread, is the Lord of hosts, Yahweh Sabaoth.
Lord of hosts, Lord of armies, right?
Yes, the commander of heaven's armies, the ultimate authority over all earthly powers, including Assyria. You must sanctify him, regard him as holy, set him apart in your mind and heart.
So fearing God correctly means seeing him as the only legitimate source of ultimate power and therefore the only true source of safety.
That's it, precisely. This holy fear, this reverence, is the root of internal stability. It's the psychological anchor in the storm of political chaos. When you fear God rightly, you cease to be paralyzed by the fear of man.
Okay, so if you get your fear aligned correctly, God becomes your sanctuary. But if you don't, he becomes something else entirely.
That's the crucial duality laid out in verses 14 and 15. It's really the heart of the chapter. For those who revere him, who trust him, the Lord of hosts will be a sanctuary, a safe place, an inviolable refuge.
A place of safety amid the flood.
Yes. But for those who refuse to trust, who reject his word and rely on their own schemes or fears, that same Lord.
He becomes what? A stumbling block.
A stone of stumbling and a rock of offense. A trap. A snare. This applies to both houses of Israel, Judah in the south, and Ephraim, the northern kingdom as well.
Wow. So the very presence of God, his truth, his law, the things meant for life, become the cause of ruin for those who disbelieve.
It's a stark paradox. The foundation stone becomes something they trip over and are broken by. It's the inevitable consequence of unbelief and self-reliance.
They run headlong into God's reality and shatter themselves against it.
That's the picture. And the text says, many among them shall stumble. They shall fall and be broken. They shall be snared and taken captive. It's a complete disaster, stemming directly from their rejection of God as their sanctuary.
Now, this image of the stumbling stone, it echoes powerfully throughout the rest of Scripture, doesn't it? It has huge implications beyond just 8th century Judah.
Absolutely enormous. This is a key typological statement. When the New Testament writers, particularly Peter and Paul, want to explain the reaction to Jesus Christ, they quote Isaiah 8.14 directly.
So Jesus is the ultimate fulfillment of this.
Yes. As the ultimate Emmanuel, God with us, his arrival forces the same choice. For those who believe, he is the chief cornerstone, the foundation of their salvation.
But for those who reject him,
he becomes the rock of offense, the stone over which they stumble into judgment and ruin. Isaiah 8 shows us this fundamental principle. God's self-revelation, his presence, is inherently divisive. It demands a response, and that response determines everything. sanctuary or stumbling stone.
Okay, so given that most people, both in the north and south, were apparently choosing the stumbling path, Isaiah gets a different instruction. It's about preservation now, isn't it?
Yes, the focus shifts dramatically in verses 16 to 18. Since the nation at large is rejecting God's message, Isaiah is told to bind up the testimony and seal the law among his disciples.
His disciples, not the general public or the king.
No. This signals a kind of failure at the institutional level, the monarchy, the official religious system. The truth isn't being upheld there, so it needs to be preserved within a smaller, faithful countercultural group.
Like creating an archive of truth when the world isn't listening, protecting it for the future.
Exactly. It's an act of spiritual conservation. When the mainstream rejects God's word, a dedicated minority must safeguard it.
And Isaiah himself models the attitude needed for this, right? This waiting.
Yes. In verse 17, he makes a personal declaration of faith. He says, I will wait for the Lord who is hiding his face from the house of Jacob, and I will hope in him.
Even acknowledging God is hiding his face, that there's a distance because of sin, he still chooses to wait and hope.
That's crucial. He recognizes the reality of judgment and divine withdrawal, but holds on to faith personally. That's the posture required to preserve the testimony.
And his children are part of this preserved message.
They become living symbols of it. Verse 18 says, Behold, I and the children whom the Lord has given me are signs and wonders in Israel from the Lord of hosts.
Signs and wonders meaning their names.
Their names primarily. Maher-Shalal-Hash-Baz, swift plunder signifying judgment, and Shir-Jashub, his other son, mentioned back in chapter 7, whose name means a remnant shall return.
So judgment and hope embodied in his kids.
Exactly. They are walking, talking parables of God's full message. Judgment is real and coming. Maher-Shalal-Hash-Baz. But ultimate preservation and restoration for a remnant is also guaranteed. Shir-Jashub. They're living proof of the sealed testimony for the disciples.
Okay, so while this faithful remnant is preserving the true word, what's the rest of the panicked population doing? Where are they turning for answers?
They're turning to the darkness. Verses 19 and 20 give this incredibly sharp condemnation of occult practices, which were clearly rampant.
Why? Out of desperation because of the war and uncertainty.
Absolutely. Having rejected God's clear public revelation through Isaiah and gripped by fear, they start seeking guidance from mediums, wizards, spiritists, people who consult the dead.
And the description of these occult practitioners is really striking, who chirp and mutter.
That phrase is so evocative. It suggests something indistinct, secretive, maybe animalistic, low volume, certainly not clear and authoritative like God's prophetic word.
It's the complete opposite of the public witness declaration on the large tablet.
Exactly. It's the spiritual counterfeit.
Yeah.
Vague, confusing, deceptive whispers from the shadows, contrasted with the bright, clear light of God's testimony.
And Isaiah basically asks, why would you do that?
He poses the devastatingly logical question. Should not a people inquire of their God? Should they inquire of the dead on behalf of the living?
It exposes the sheer folly of it. Why ask the dead when you have a living God?
It's the ultimate test of spiritual sanity. And then comes the litmus test for any teaching or guidance they might receive from any source.
Back to the source.
Verse 20, to the law and to the testimony. That's the standards. God's revealed authoritative word. If they do not speak according to this word,
then what?
It is because they have no dawn, no light, no truth in them. They are fundamentally in darkness if their message doesn't align with God's established revelation.
That's a timeless principle for discernment, really.
Absolutely crucial. The written word is the ultimate benchmark.
And the chapter doesn't end there. It shows the consequences, the grim reality of choosing that darkness over the law and testimony.
Verses 21 and 22 paint a truly bleak picture. It's the end result of rejecting God.
What does it look like?
Total social and psychological collapse. Those who follow the darkness will pass through the land greatly distressed and hungry. It's physical, spiritual, emotional starvation.
And their reaction isn't repentance.
No, it's rage. And when they are hungry, they will be enraged and will curse their king and their God. They lash out, blaming everyone, even turning against the divine they rejected. They shake their fists at heaven.
That's profound despair.
Utter despair. And wherever they look, verse 22 says they look upward, they look to the earth. What do they see?
Only darkness.
Behold, distress and darkness, the gloom of anguish, and the final image. They will be thrust into thick darkness. Utter, oppressive, inescapable night. That's the final destination for those who willfully turn from the light.
So stepping back from the specific verses, this whole crisis in Judah wasn't just political, was it? It was deeply spiritual, with unseen forces at play.
Absolutely. You can't understand chapter 8 without seeing the behind-the-scenes spiritual dynamics.
Like what? What's going on that isn't immediately obvious?
Well, first and foremost, you see divine sovereignty in action. Assyria, this terrifying empire, acting out its own ambitions.
It's actually just a tool.
A tool in God's hands. The overflowing river he directs to execute judgment on Syria, Israel, and even Judah. Now, Assyria has free will, they're arrogant, and God will judge them later for their cruelty.
But right now, their actions are serving God's purpose.
Exactly. It shows that complex interplay between human history and divine orchestration. God works through, and sometimes in spite of, human actions.
What other spiritual dynamics are visible?
The clear spiritual warfare over sources of guidance. The turn to mediums and wizards who chirp and mutter.
That wasn't just a cultural thing.
No, the text presents it as turning to demonic or deceptive spiritual forces. It's an active attempt by the enemy to offer counterfeit guidance, to pull people away from the living God's clear, authoritative word. It's a battle for hearts and minds, fought between divine revelation and dark deception.
And God's intervention with Isaiah, that strong hand upon me.
That highlights the supernatural reality of true prophecy. Isaiah isn't just sharing his opinion or political analysis. He's under divine compulsion. God is ensuring his message gets through unfiltered, despite the king's unbelief and the people's resistance. It underscores the authority of God's communication.
Okay, so taking all this, the political panic, the fear of conspiracy, the rejection of quiet truth, the turn to occult alternatives, the unseen spiritual battles, how does this ancient story connect with us right now?
Oh, the connections are incredibly direct. Start with that reliance on human power.
Judah trusting alliances with Syria, Israel, or even Assyria.
How is that different from us placing our ultimate faith in political systems, economic forecasts, military strength, or technological fixes to solve all our problems?
We also tend to reject the gently flowing waters of, say, steady faith, ethical living community.
In favor of the big, dramatic, human-engineered floods that promise quick fixes but often end up causing more damage, right? We still prefer the visible power of the Euphrates over the quiet sustenance of Shiloah.
And the psychological climate, the fear, the paranoia about conspiracies.
It's almost uncanny, isn't it?
Yeah.
The widespread anxiety, the echo chambers of fear, the panic over perceived threats, the way misinformation spreads and drives destructive decisions. Isaiah 8 feels like it could have been written last week.
And God's message to Isaiah is the same message to us. Don't call conspiracy what they call conspiracy. Don't fear what they fear.
Exactly. Find your stability by fearing, by reverencing the Lord of hosts alone. That's the only true anchor against the cultural waves of panic and paranoia.
What about the occult aspect? Is that still relevant?
Absolutely, though it might look different. The explicit seeking of mediums might be less common in some circles, but look at the explosion of New Age practices, astrology becoming mainstream, the reliance on self-proclaimed gurus, crystals, tarot, spiritual shortcuts that bypass God's revealed truth.
So anything that offers guidance or power apart from God's established word.
Yes, it's the same temptation, seeking easy, personalized, non-authoritative answers instead of submitting to the law and the testimony. It's the modern equivalent of listening to the chirping and muttering instead of the clear voice of God.
And the result is the same.
Spiritual confusion, leading eventually to that same gloom of anguish and thick darkness for those who persistently reject the true light. The parallels are really quite sobering.
It really boils down to that central theme again. God is Emmanuel. He is with us, but his presence forces a choice. #outrat.
It does. Isaiah 8 is just such a vital chapter. It's this intense exploration of what God's presence means in a world gripped by fear.
Yeah.
It doesn't shy away from judgment. It exposes the deadliness of panic and misplaced trust. But it constantly calls for that radical reliance on God alone.
Using those incredible signs, the metaphors of water, that central duality.
Sanctuary or stumbling stone. It really pushes you, the listener, to examine. Where is my fear directed? What or who am I truly trusting when things get rough? Is God my refuge, or is his truth something I find inconvenient, something I trip over?
It's a stark choice. His presence isn't neutral. It either saves or it judges based on our response.
And maybe the most provocative thought to leave everyone with comes from that very bleak ending in verse 22, that thick darkness, the anguish, the despair.
Yeah, why end on such a down note?
Because prophetically, that absolute darkness is the necessary setup for what comes next. You have to hit rock bottom, spiritually speaking. That profound gloom, that obscure night covering the land, is the exact condition that cries out for light.
Ah, so the darkness of chapter 8 creates the desperate need
For the great light, promised in the very next verse, the beginning of chapter 9. The despair prepares the world for the arrival of the ultimate Emmanuel, the divine king who shatters the darkness. The judgment here sets the stage for the most profound hope.
A hope we'll need to explore in our next deep dive.
Exactly. From the depths of chapter 8 comes the dawn of chapter 9.